Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of this fabulous week of summer school on SIPTA. Supersized probabilities. Let me just introduce myself briefly and encourage you to interrupt me at any point. It's not an interruption, it's a class, so we'll have a conversation. So if you have a question, just speak up, raise a hand. There are no required breakpoints for interrupting the presentation. Let me say a word about who I am and how I come to be standing. So I think of myself as part of a second generation of imprecise probability researchers. The other second generation is who's got sitting here. Why is it a second generation? A lot of teachers, the ones at least that I think of as the principal mentors in our intellectual lives, were part of the first wave of the precise probability. In my own case, I studied as an undergraduate with Henry Heiberg and Amy Macy in the literature from time to time. And then I was too Bayesian for Henry, so he said, go work with Isaac Levi. So he sent me off to work with Isaac Levi, who was my thesis advisor. And Isaac found me too Bayesian also. Referred to me as Henry's curse, because they were good friends, even though they were intellectual competitors. And that was an era that I liked very much. You could see people who were intellectual competitors. Isaac was quite Bayesian in his decision theory. Isaac Levi, decision theory work helped to introduce the use of sets of probabilities decision theory, which is what our subject matter is today. And Henry was much more of an inference type, interested in belief and the role of probability in relating beliefs. His interest in decision theory was not so much, and he was much less Bayesian, in fact, anti-Bayesian. So it's nice to be brought up to see that kind of family feud. You have a chance to watch your parents fight. You see much Bayesian. So I had that benefit seeing both sides growing up. The other people with whom I work regularly, Mark and Jay, this is CMU colleagues. We've been working together for 40 years. We have papers that go back 40 years. And we still meet every week remotely sometimes. But so our conversations now are quite boring because we all told each other the same jokes 4 or 5 times. We refer to the jokes by numbers. So I'll say 17 and they say, oh, that one again. But still we find that coming back to topics, these are wonderful topics, so they have layers and layers of onions. And you each peel off another layer of the onion to discover there's more subtlety below. And so we have plenty to keep us busy. The other two who have joined us recently, on the right is Robin Gom. She's also second generation, despite her age, because her thesis advisor was Art Dempsey. These are Dempsey. And Raphael Stern is the son of another statistician, Yossi Stern, from Sao Paulo. And Yossi sent Raphael to study with Jay. And so he's a student of Jay's. And Jay is a Leonard Savage professor, emeritus at Carnegie Mellon. He was junior colleague to Jimmy Savage. And Mark worked with Jared C. Naiman. So these you see are, we've rubbed elbows with some big names and had a chance to learn from them. So that's a bit of the background. I think in terms of other second, I don't know how to classify her because he seems to be too generous. I mean, there's none of the big names, at least as far as I know, Rick, you came to this on your own and you did it on your own. So he's an outlier. He's some sort of mutant. He did it all on his own. But Peter Wilding is a second generation because he's a student of Terry Fine. That's what Terry Fine's name up there. So you're looking at the older members now of this community are themselves second generation. The outliers. So that gives you a bit of a sense. It's not an old community, I don't think, which means there's lots of open questions, and I'm sure we've made lots of mistakes that we're always trying now to self-correct. My attitude is one I've been raised as a pragmatist. I'm much more worried about how to improve my current state than worrying about how I got to the next state. So if you ask me questions, I will gravitate towards seeing them as grounds for how to improve where we are. And that's what I'll try and present to you some topics today, which are forward-looking so that they're open-ended, not closed. So I'm not trying to give you a sense of a closed book. It's a sense that these are things we're still working on. And that's why I encourage the conversation. Let me give you a sense of how I want to organize the day, but I'm susceptible to temptations very easily. So if you ask the right question, I will veer off in a different direction. Some people who've worked with me know that it's very easy to distract me, intellectual shiny object. If you want me to go in different directions, no problem. The conventional format for these days is 4 sessions, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. And here's how I propose we do it. I want to start with a framework. You've heard the name Bruno Diffinetti. I want to start with the framework of Diffinetti. And since it's decision theory, that's our way into it. I want to look at decision theory a la Diffinetti's approach, which is, by my reconstruction, and it's hardly reconstruction, I think that's the meaning of Diffinetti wrote, it's game theoretic. So we're going to introduce a game theoretic perspective and relate that to imprecise probabilities. And by the end of the day, we'll come back to a topic, IP forecasting, forward induction in sequential games, because I think IP has an opportunity to make improvements in contemporary game theory. I mean, the way economists talk about serious game theory in a way that I think no other perspective can. So we'll cycle back on one of these issues and try and talk about how you can use IP theory to improve game theory. And this is open theory. This is a place where there are lots of questions to do this. But I'll give you at least an example of thinking that IP can solve some aspects of some open issues in sequential games that I don't think any other perspective can. Anyway, back to Diffinetti. We'll talk about coherence in Diffinetti's technical sense. Now, here's one of the problems. We all like to use similar words, maybe the same word, but the words won't mean exactly the same. So when I say coherence, you'll see the other definition. It will be a little bit different than what a little bit. There's enough overlap to justify using the same word. But when we get to mathematical details, if we get pushed that way, we have to go back to the definition that's being used, because there will be some differences. Many of these differences, at least in the IP case, come about when you move from finite structures to infinite structures. How you make that shift varies with author researcher, because there are lots of moves that are possible. In general, infinity presents wonderfully many opportunities, and we don't all follow exactly the same path. So we'll talk about Diffinetti coherence, and I'll try and end the first session in the morning with what Diffinetti calls the fundamental theorem of probability, which when you look at it, looks like, oh, he's trying to take us into IP. So and this is his title, not mine, not exaggerating. Fundamental theorem of probability theory, Diffinetti, is what looks like an invitation to do IP. But when you look and see what Diffinetti said later, we don't have to look at the Diffinetti literature that way, but he teamed up with Savage, same Savage I mentioned before, so you may know Savage's work, to write an essay in the early 60s saying, you don't want to do IP. So we're going to use Diffinetti as an opening to IP, and then I'll try and explain to you why I think he was resistant, and then show you how we get past that. So that'll be in the morning. The second part, I want to focus on a particular subject application of IP, which has to do with the value of information. Remember I said I'm a pragmatist, and I tend to worry about how to improve things, and I like scientific method of improving things. We collect new information, we let the information resolve differences rather than guns in 50 cases or those other alternatives. And then the question is, okay, so what does IP say about the value of information? I want to go through, because along with the new opportunities that IP offers, there are also new responsibilities, because it suggests that information may carry negative value in ways that traditional decision theory says it's not possible. So when you have new opportunities, typically there are opportunities for making mistakes which weren't there before. And the value of information is one way of highlighting that. So I'll talk about that. And that also connects up with sequential decision making. Of course, it has to do with For example, when do I stop collecting information if I have a decision to make, solve the problem? So that will take us through the morning. In the afternoon, I'd like to look at issues a bit more about rival decision theories. There's more than one decision theory for using sets of probabilities. And I'd like to look at it in connection with a different interpretation of decision theory, which is decision theory for groups of agents. I don't remember if yesterday you proposed quickly at one point thinking about a set of probabilities as representing a collection of individuals. I don't know if you mentioned that. Came close at one point, but I don't know if I missed the mornings for a second. So you can think of a set of probabilities as representing a group agent. And the question is there, I want to suggest that when you look at that perspective, IP is really on firm ground because the attempt to represent the group agent with a single probability, the kind of pooling problems, quickly runs into all kinds of impossibilities and warnings that you're going the wrong way. Whereas IP says, well, no problem, we don't have to replace the group opinion with a single opinion. We use a set of opinions. So I'll talk about issues relating to that and right after lunch. Hopefully you are still a little woozy after lunch. If you see that, I just did not get away with hand waving. And then section 4, we'll end the day looking at 3, I call it opportunities / challenges, about things that need to be done or could be done with precise probabilities relating to decision theory. As I said, I think there's an interesting opportunity for improving traditional game theory with IP, or forward induction. What that means, we'll see later. I want to look at topics in forecasting, which I think will be a prologue to work later, Jason. I think you're working with forecasting. I want to talk about forecasting a little bit and suggest what Diffinetti was onto there. This will take us again back to game theory because it has to do with strategic action. There's a game in play here. If there's a forecaster or someone evaluating the forecaster, what should the forecaster do to get a good score? I mean, you know how to study for the test or play for the way the game is scored. And then I want to end by talking again about dominance principles, getting us back to Diffinetti coherence, different flavors of dominance, and what is, I think, still very much current work about trying to use different dominance principles to make these decisions work. And that suggests that we need to has to do with infinities of one sort or another, and will engage us in concerns about wanting to look at more than just real value structures and non-Archimedean structure. So that's the plan for the day. But as I say to you, if you don't like where we're going, just dangle something shiny in front of me and I'll follow. Okay. If you don't own it, buy it, put it on your shelf, open it, use it. Start to use it. Thomas is here. Frank, I don't think is online. I don't think Frank is. Gert's here, of course, and Matthias was online. Is Matthias still online? Matthias, you out there? So Matthias is student of Gert, so he's third. He's second generation, counting third as first. Matthias, you can consider yourself second generation. I don't know. You can say something. Gert has been very kind in allowing me to meet some of his more talented students. So Matthias was the first one that you shipped over to Carnegie Mellon's program. And then Eric, I don't think registered. Some of you may know Eric. And then Otter was the third one. They gave me 3 chances. I don't know if I've struck out before. Ask Otter whether he's don't go there. Get this book. And then what I did is I wrote up just some references of these are famous books that you ought to get hold of and put in your library if you're interested in these topics that I'm talking about today. You can read this yourself. And then I put some more recent ones up, and do use the SIPTA site the studying the imprecise probability conferences, there's a lot of work that goes on there, but it's going to take you patience, scholarship to find the threads that connect the papers. That we haven't quite figured out how to do so far as I know. But if someone wants to study something like sequential decisions, it would be nice if we had a updated search engine that would allow linking together the papers in the SIPTA Society, because we've been doing this since 1999, 2 years ago, hundreds of papers. And finding your way through the conversation, I think could be assisted with some intelligent software, which I don't think we've yet put onto the web page. So until that, you'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way, do your own searching of these papers. Okay, enough on that. Let's get to work. Okay. So I want to see how far we can go in the beginning with just thinking about dominance. So we're doing decision theory. So we'll assume, I'll keep things finite for a while. So uncertainty has to do with finite partitions. Acts are thought of as functions from states, the elements of this partition, little omega, to outcomes. What outcomes are is going to be as generous as we can possibly make it so that we can encompass as many decisions. And the first kind of principle of decision that I want to look at is a dominance principle. You've seen this discussed already, but we'll formulate it this way. There's the capital U following the Finetti, the idealized decision agent, and you're able to formulate your decision problem so that acts of functions from this common partition omega, which I'm keeping here, finite, so that pairwise exclusive situations and mutually exhaustive against what you believe. That is, omega doesn't have to be a logical partition. You're allowed to use the background information to say, I know it's one of these n. Yes, logic says there could be an omega n plus 1, but those are ruled out by what I know. So we're allowing ourselves to keep things finite that way. So, for example, we're flipping a coin, worried about outcomes, about the outcome takes and fails. Yeah, the coin could land on a example. Logic says the coin could grow wings and fly away. You rule it out more seriously. If someone started to worry about that, I'd worry about the person. Anyway, so we have functions from states to outcomes, and what's required here is a kind of a preference structure that allows you to say, well, if I could identify the choice between the outcomes, that would be no problem for me. So if I knew the omega, it would become a decision under certainty, and we're supposing those kinds of decisions are already resolved, so I can compare the outcomes in each column. I don't have to yet cross over. I don't have to compare 011 with 022. I don't have to compare that. Just down the columns. And suppose I can, at least in looking over these, say, look, for every state, the second row outcome is strictly preferred over the first row outcome. I prefer 02J to 01J for each of these AJs. And that's strict dominance. And the principle would say that an act in a pairwise choice between A1 and A2, if I've got a head-to-head competition between A1 and A2, under these conditions, I strictly prefer A2 over A1. I would then be able to talk about preferring the acts. And in more general decision problems where there is more than a menu of 2, I would say what this means is that if I've got a menu of many acts and A1 and A2 are in them, then I know A1 is not an admissible choice. A2 prevents A1 from being an admissible choice. A2 itself may get eliminated by other principles, but that's all right. A2's presence means that A1 is not choosable by confidence. If it's head-to-head, it's straight, typically. But since we're also going to be exploring decision rules that are not pairwise, we have to think about what these principles mean when we've got a menu of more than 2 options. And so dominance in those settings, without presuming binariness of preference, and preference always reduces to binary comparisons, this says if you've got dominance of A2 over A1, then if you've got a broader menu and A2 is present and A1 is present, then A1 is resolved as inadmissible. I don't know yet what I'm choosing, but I know it's not inadmissible. Questions? Well, let me prompt you with one. I'm trained also as a philosopher. You show me a principle, I start thinking about counterexamples. My senior colleague, Clark Lee, what do you make of the name? Clark says philosophy is destructive testing. So someone proposes a theory, and the good philosophers immediately are out tearing it to pieces. Sorry, demolition. Demolition is our job. They clear the way for something better. I don't like that. Anyway, let's do some exploring of soft points in this principle. So the first thing you say, I'll show you a case, simple case we've got dominance, and I will choose the dominated option. And this will open the door to a little case here. So here's a binary state space, 2 acts. I've put it up with enough money to get your attention, I think. And you'll see Act 2 dominates Act 1 if you always prefer more money to less in every state. I mean, the idea could be weird tax structure in some states where more money actually causes you to have less wealth or something, but let's not worry about that. So 400 is better than 300, 200 is better than 100. Act 2 strictly dominates Act 1. Might it be reasonable nonetheless to prefer Act 1 over Act 2? I would say yes. These principles have additional tacit assumptions. And let me suggest that we start to think about this game theoretically. What if choosing Act 1, whatever choosing means, actually brings about state 1. Act 2 brings about state 2. We can worry about in a moment how to do this in game theory. It's a very nice setting for doing it. But if doing Act 1 or choosing Act 1 makes omega 1 practically certain or highly probable, and doing Act 2 makes omega 2 highly probable, then I'm looking at a comparison of basically 300 with 200. I prefer 200. Notice I'm now on the off columns. I'm comparing outcomes across different states. But I say more money is best, and I say $300 in state 1 is better than $200 in state 2. And so I would do Act 1. So let's start. So here's what I would like you to do, just to get a flavor. We'll take some time to develop this. Just start to think of omega 1 and omega 2 as the options for second decision maker, because eventually we're going to worry about group decisions. And suppose the game is going to be played as follows. Role player, who's the one in charge of Act 1 or Act 2, chooses first and faces these outcomes. Column player plays second and controls omega 1 and omega 2. Omega 1 and omega 2 are options for column player. Fill in some payments such that if column player sees what role player chooses, sequential game, role player plays first, column player plays second. Column player will choose in such a way that role player's reasonable choices to choose the dominating outcome. Just take a few minutes, just get the coffee going. Just fill in some payments. It's pretty obvious, and just take a few moments to do that, and we'll look at it, because this will bring up some principles that we'll be using. This coherence game is a 2-person sequential game, so we might as well start to warn ourselves about this. So we're looking at a game in which this dominance principle will be violated. And reasonably, everyone would say yes. Take a minute or two to do that. There are several variants. I mean, there's no one right answer, but there are several. I'm sure you're getting the feel for what's going on now. Let me just fill in the table this way. We're going to look at the decision displayed sequentially, but I want to get the payments out so you'll see what's going on. So you want here, so that if A1 is chosen, columns facing left and right, column wants to choose L, so we could put 4 there and 3 there. So if column is seeing that A1 has been chosen, has a choice between 4 and 3, we'll choose that. And then over here, we can put 1 and 2. These are in hundreds or thousands or whatever units you want. And if this is what's going on, then what we see is we're facing a sequential game of the following sort. Row player plays first. That's R for row. I can choose A1 or A2. And then column player will play second. Maybe I should make that green. This is really an informal introduction to some notation, which I'm using this game as an excuse to do. And so column is choosing second and has a choice between left and right. And here the outcomes, this would be A1L, which would be 1, 4. Sorry, 3, that needs to be black. And this would be 1, 3. This would be, and this would be 3, 3. Did I already do this backwards? 1. Yes, I see what I did wrong here. Sure. See, this is what happens. Someone should have stopped me from making such a silly mistake. 3, 1, 4, 2. Now it makes more sense what I'm trying to say. So 3, 4, 1, 3. And this is going to be the second row. So this is going to be 4, 1, and this is going to be 2, 2. This is going to be 4. This is going to be 4, 1. This is going to be 2. I'm sorry, normally not this bad. 3, 4. Over here, we've got 1, 3. So this will certainly convince you that we can go slow because I'll make mistakes. 4, 1. And this is 2, 2. Fine one. Just to get that silly as it is. Okay. That's not going to work. I have to blank out the screen. Screen blank. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so what we're looking at here is this is what's called the extensive form of this sequential game when I say that row plays first, column plays second. And this is resolved typically by what's called a backward induction analysis. You imagine that row player is either here, column player is here or here, column player is choosing between 4 and 3 because column is concerned only about columns payment, so we'll choose this. And over here, columns choose choices between 4, 1, 2, between 1 and 2, and chooses this. It should be green. Sorry. So that's what columns' preferred strategy is. If facing this choice, choose 4. If facing this choice, choose 2. And row player sees that and says, ah, if I choose A1, I get 3. If I choose A2, I get 2. And so row player chooses A1 in a backward induction. This is an elementary example of backward induction of the extensive form. There's one more perspective which we need to look at, which game theorists use, which is the perspective that would allow discussing the Nash equilibria of the game, which is to take the sequential game and flatten it down to a simultaneous game in which column has strategies to choose. So this is the last little bit of notation or perspective that we need to consider. That is what game theorists typically like to do, and what you need to do if you want to apply machinery like Nash equilibrium, is to formulate the game as a simultaneous choice. We're saying this game is being presented extensively, but you can think of it with a different partition so that it becomes simultaneous, so that what column player is doing is choosing a strategy in the technical sense of saying what she would do if here and if here. And in that case, there are 4 strategies, because you can have left, left, where we can think of this as the A1 up, down, A1, A2. If seeing A1 choose left, if seeing A2 choose left, that's one strategy. Then we have left, right, right, left, 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 and right, right. Thank you very much. Yes, I can't even tell right from left. And if you do that, then what we get are the following payments. I'll just write them out for you. I have done this in advance just to show you. I didn't trust what I could do on the fly. So we then have 1, 3. I'll forget about the colors now. This is A1, A2, 1, 3, 1, 3, 3, 4. 3, 4, and down here we have 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2. That's 4, 1. No, that's 1, 1. A2, 4, 1. There we go. So just double check, make sure I've done that right. What I've done is I've taken the problem and switched from this partition to a partition that suggests where the agents might be making simultaneous independent choices. We can say, go into the game, and before, even though it's sequential, we know that column player will get to see what row player has done, and so we'll be able to develop a partition of strategies. These are called strategies because they say what the player will do in each contingency where she or he might be facing a choice. Column player has 2 contingencies, row has 1, so it's a 2 by 4. And now if we start to look at this partition, we can see that from column player's point of view, LR is dominated by RL. 4 is bigger than 3, 2 is bigger than 1. So dominance, we get that off the table from column player's point of view. Column player has 4 options. Simple dominance would say left, right is dominated by right, left. Remember, this is a menu now of 4 options. Right, left dominates left, right. And now we don't have any more simple dominance left, but there is a weak dominance lurking here in the sense that from column player's point of view, right, left does at least as well as either the first LL, and sometimes better, because 4 is better than 3 and 2 is as good as 2. So if you were doing weak dominance, right, left would weakly dominate left, left. Everyone see that? So right, left is paying off from column player's point of view, 4 versus 3 if A1 is chosen, and 2 and 2 is tied here, but better here. So right, left weakly dominates left, left, and right, left weakly dominates right, right. Because 2 is better than 1 and 4 is as good as. So if you were doing weak dominance as an addition to just ordinary dominance, you would also eliminate those 2, and you would wind up with column player saying, I'm doing right, left. And if that's column player strategy, then clearly A1 is better than A2 for row player. So this way of using weak dominance coincides with this backward induction strategy. and allows us to say, yes, that's a correct payment structure, but given the details of the game, that's irrelevant. Dominance in this partition is irrelevant. So this shows that when you've got weak dominance, when you've got act-state dependence, that is, the choice of an act by one can influence the state, which may be under the control of some other player, then we need to attend to the details because one partition may be completely misleading. Here's a partition. There's no question that A2 dominates A1 in this partition, and this partition is valid in terms of the payoff structure. I'm not refuting it. I'm simply saying there's more to the story, and because of that additional story, the dominance in this partition is ignorable. And you wind up, if you want, using weak dominance in the partition of strategies, which contradicts the partition dominance in this simple 2 by 2. These two stories can stick together. This one needs weak dominance to get back to this. It doesn't rely on just simple dominance. But none of them contradict the payoff structure. So this shows that, yes, names.
Yeah. What did you get the columns payoffs?
Okay, the columns. So normally in a game, normally, that's technical, normal structure for games. A strategic version of the game is to set up a decision problem for multiple decision makers. I'm using non-traditional game theory, and I'm saying, think of the players as facing decision problems where their states of uncertainty may include what the other players are choosing. In this case, I've set it up in such that row players' uncertainty is entirely determined by what the other player. There are no other states of affairs concerned. It's not about whether you're taking an umbrella and it's raining. I'm only concerned about what you're doing. There are no other states of uncertainty. And in that case, if the other states of uncertainty are controlled by a different player, we get a game. And games are normally typically set up in a supposition like this, where it's thought that there's simultaneous choice. And we're seeing why so, because if there isn't simultaneous choice in this case, this partition is a correct partition of outcomes, but it's not one that you want to use dominance in. The idea of setting up this structure is to say the players simultaneously choose between their strategies. A strategy is a specification of what you would do in each contingency you might face. This is very much in accord with Gert's discussion of those strategies. Yes. Yes, please.
Can you maybe talk through how you exactly get players in the first column of the basically.
Okay, left, right. This says that if A1 choose left and if A2 choose right, so that should be 3. But that right and wrong?
Yes, left, right.
Did I reverse some things here?
Yeah.
What's been reversed? Those two have been reversed? Left, right is 3, 4 in A1. And 1, 3. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. I mean, if I can't get this right, we should all go home and do something else. So we're just looking across that row. And if L is chosen, it's 3, 4. If right is chosen, it's 1, 3. So 3, 4, 1, 3, 1, 3. So something is wrong here. Oh, I think I said where the dominance is, right? I mean, the correct solution should be column players choosing left if A1. So here's the dominance. I just had the columns mislabeled.
Yes.
Oh, that was too.
In my notes, I must have switched around the columns and the rows. Yeah, I must have done that. Sorry. So 3, 4 dominates 4 dominates 3, and over here, so these are just, let's write them out correctly, sorry. 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 3, 1, 3, and 8, 2 down here, I've got now for left, right, so it's 4, 1, 2, 2. And then 4, 1, 2, 2. Now I think I've got them right. Yes? Does that take care of it? Thank you for correcting me. I had my notes here and I had my notes, the columns, and my excuse, poor excuse. Okay, but the dominance still applies. Left, right dominates right, left, and then you have the weak dominance from column players' point of view. Yes.
So just basically, still confused about the table. Why do you say left? So only the second player chooses between left and right.
Yes, so here we're looking at the second column. So the question is, so these are this, from column player's point of view, there are 4 options and 2 states of uncertainty. Turn the table right, rotate it. 2 states are A1, A2. If A1, then you're getting that. If A2, you're getting that. And you'll see that 4 dominates 3 and 2 dominates 1. So left, right dominates right, left.
Yeah, I think I did read this. I was confused why you wrote A1, A2 on the green on the left.
A1, this is what, yeah, this is
the labels.
for this is how to interpret, right? Yes, that's right, yes. This says the strategy is if A1 do L, if A2 do R. You mean all my messing up got you confused? I'm sorry. Right. But the idea is that we have here this table and this table. They both display correct payoff structure. Dominance in this table is ignorable. And the excuse for dominance in this table being ignorable is because there's act-state dependence from role players' point of view. The choice of an act influences the choice of the state. The game brings that out. And so this is the table you want to use dominance in, because in this table, there's no act-state dependence. The players are choosing strategies simultaneously. Row is choosing between A1 and A2. Column is choosing amongst these 4 strategies. And this sequential version coincides with this table too. Okay, yes?
So the dominant strategy for column is left, right.
Weakly dominating strategy, weakly dominating.
Okay, and then, yeah, if
Left, right, if A1 choose left, if A2 choose right.
okay, but then once columns decided that, or if row knows the column will decide.
Yeah, this is all ex ante, right? In the sense that everyone can see how the other one's thinking. There are no secrets here. There's no private
And
information.
then the choice between two, right? So
No, this is 3 and 2.
that's
This is 3. There's 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 3, 1, 3, 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, 1, 2, 2, 4, 1, 2. So the choice is between 3 and 2, and you choose A1. Okay. So these are the ideas that we will be using, and given how, I mean, it's good that I made the mistakes only because it gets us to review the details to understand what's going on. Sorry, this is more than embarrassing, but okay. Well, we'll make it into a feature by saying we went through the details. So we've got this table and this table. They're both correct payment structures, but dominance doesn't apply in this table because the extra story is that there's sequential action. Sorry about that. Okay, back to this. So watch out, we'll be running into a bunch of these. And the time is, where's the clock? It's
9:48.
and we should be taking a break at, okay, good. Let's get, so those are all the errors. All the errors this morning are out of the way, no more errors. Okay. So this already highlights multiple dominance principles. So it turns out that the dominance principle Di Finetti uses in his betting game is a more demanding requirement. It's not merely that you prefer A2 over A1, but you must uniformly prefer, and that would arise in cases of infinite partition. So I'm already hinting at where the mathematics for the infinite partitions enters. Because if I have infinitely many states, it could be that A2 is always A2I is always referred to A1, O2I is always referred to O1I, but that preference gets closer and closer and closer. Think of this as, say one of them is all zeros, and the bottom one is payment like 1 over n. So 1 over n is always better than 0, but the difference is shrinking and going to 0. So the Diffinetti actually requires a more demanding sense of dominance, if dominance is to be applied. It's that there's uniform dominance, so that there's separation always between the preferred and dispreferred. Each one that's preferred must be preferred by some uniform constant epsilon. If it's a finite partition, this issue doesn't arise. But the minute you move to infinite partitions, Diffinetti requires this. We can ask why. It has to do with the topic that I've not introduced in the notes explicitly. His excuse for this has to do with what kinds of probabilities do you want to allow in as coherent betting strategies. And it has to do with whether you require countable additivity or not. He does not require countable additivity. And in order to make room for that extra liberality, he needs a dominance principle that's more demanding. Then there's simple dominance, which is what we've been working with. Every second row outcome is preferred to every first row outcome. And then there's weak dominance, which I just applied for you in the case of the sequential game, which is that each second row outcome is at least as good, weakly preferred to the first row outcome, and at least for some states, strictly preferred. And that's what we use. And weak dominance. So if Act 2 uniformly dominates Act 1, then it simply dominates, and it simply dominates. But we will be looking at concerns where we want to use each of these. And I will start by showing you what Diffinetti did in the case of uniform dominance. So Diffinetti doesn't restrict himself to finite partitions. So let's allow ourselves at least innumerable partitions. Higher cardinalities we don't have to worry about. And we're supposing we've got a field of sets of a Boolean algebra over the events. So there's an event, there's a complement, I can take the join or the union, I can take the meet or the intersection. Let's not worry about infinitary sigma operations. And then there's a collection of random variables. There was this discussion yesterday of what variables. The random variable just means a function from states to real numbers. And there are measurability conditions, but given that I'm dealing with countable partitions, they're not so awful. The game is a two-person sequential game. This is what Diffinetti introduced in the 1930s. He doesn't emphasize that it's a two-person sequential game because he's writing in the 30s, and by the way, Morgenstern is 1944, so game theory doesn't get to be officially introduced until 10 years later. But it is a two-person sequential game. So there are two players. The first player, the one who plays first, is called the bookie, or you can think of it like a merchant who's going to create prices. And the bookie has basically a choice to play this game or to abstain. And abstain is important because abstain will be where the bookie, basically by abstaining, keeps a constant value 0 in wealth. And that will be used for dominance purposes. So we need to have that option. So the bookie can abstain and say, I don't want to play your game. And that counts as a 0 outcome to the bookie, or can play. And if playing, has to announce a fair price called the provision for each random variable in the set pi. Pi is some collection of random variables. A fair price for each element of pi, for each random variable, has to announce a price, a fair price, which will be a two-sided price, a price that can be used for buying or selling. And the game is played as follows. The gambler who plays second, the customer, sees the prices that are posted on the menu. The merchant is producing a menu saying, I will buy and sell random variables at the following price per random variable. And the customer is allowed to make finitely many such choices. The reason for this finite rather than infinite has to do again with whether you want the game to allow strategies that are countably finite and not countably additive. So that's the finitely there is related to that clause. And when Gambler chooses the quantity gamma I for random variable xi, that fixes a contract. And now you will begin to see something that should look familiar from what Gert did yesterday. So I've color-coded the options. So QI was the price the bookie, the merchant, announced first. And the gambler is saying, my strategy is that having seen that you're announcing price QI, I want to engage in a contract where my strategy says fix gamma I. And what gamma I does then is create the following somewhat complicated payoff structure. It's a two-person zero-sum game. So the gambler, that is the customer, is paying to the merchant this quantity. Let's fix two values just to see, three values just to see what's going on. Let's let gamma I be 1. Then that's the realized value of the random variable. And that is the price the bookie announced. But in this case, if this is the payment to the bookie is paying the gambler, the customer has sold to the bookie the random variable xi for a price qi. So the bookie is paying, the merchant is paying the customer qi to buy xi. Customer gets, the bookie pays out qi, customer gets qi, gambler gets qi, and is obliged to pay back to the bookie the realized value of xi in whatever state omega remains. If gamma I is -1, then we just reverse the signs on these and change who's buying and selling. So if gamma I is -1, then the bookie has been paid QI, the merchant has been paid QI, and the merchant owes to the customer the realized value of xi. The control for who's buying and selling is in the green, the customer, the second player. So the merchant has to post these idealized fair prices, fair because they're can be used by the customer either to buy or to sell. And the customer decides. If customer sets this to 0, then there's no exchange relating to xi. And the customer is only allowed finitely many of these non-zeros, only finitely many contracts. Trivial, non-trivial contracts, all the others are set to 0. The magnitude of gamma I tells you the number of units that the customer is buying or selling with it. That is, if I pay 2 here, I would say I want to double the size of the contract, so I'm buying 2 units or selling 2 units. Not twice the price then. I mean, the price per unit is the same, but the total exchanges. So there are 2 features of the gamma I. There's the sign, whether it's positive or negative, which tells us whether the second player, the customer, the gambler, has chosen to buy or sell at the price the bookie is offering, the merchant's offering, and then the magnitude, which is the number of units, and they can be fractional units.
Just to be clear, whether gamma I is positive or negative fixes whether the gamma buys or sells.
That's right. That's right. The gambler is forcing the bookie to buy. I mean, the merchant has posted these prices, and the prices are understood as two-sided because they can be used either for buying or for selling. And you know where this is going for IP purposes when we separate the prices into one-sided prices, and the merchant will give a separate price for buying and a separate price for selling, as real merchants do. They want to buy low and sell high. But the initial formulation was fair prices.
Sorry, it also says in the
Yeah. Okay. This one okay? And given what Gert went through, you see how the origins for what Gert was going. I was already done. This is Diffinetti, 1930s. So Diffinetti says, I'm going to tell you something about what's a legitimate strategy for the merchant, the bookie. The bookie wants to set prices that avoid the possibility of a strategy on the customer's part that gives the customer a sure gain by putting together various contracts. What's a sure gain? Well, we're going to sum together the values of the contracts as when multiple contracts are made, you just sum together the values. And Diffinetti says the bookie's price are incoherent. This is his technical sense of incoherent, violate the dominance principle. If the gambler has a strategy that produces a uniform negative payment to the bookie. So that is, the gambler has a strategy where these are the outcomes to the bookie. 011 is a negative sum, the bookie is paying out more than receiving. 012 is a negative, and these are uniformly negative. There's an epsilon such that the bookie must lose at least epsilon. If that's possible, the gambler has shown, the bookie is suffering, the gambler has shown that the bookie is suffering a uniform shore loss by the strategy of gamma I stars that yield a uniform negative, which is uniformly dominated by abstaining. And Diffinetti says, you'd be crazy to, as a merchant, to play the game if you're exposing yourself to this kind of uniform loss. Better not play with it. So that's the first part of Diffinetti, so that he wants to say under what conditions. So the fundamental theorem, the theorem that Diffinetti begins with, not the fundamental theorem, is the one that says, I want to tell you what strategies are coherent and what strategies are incoherent for pricing. And again, a strategy for the bookie is going to be a specification of prices. Bookie plays first. Fair prices. Prices that can be used for buying and selling at the discretion of the customer. And the strategy is coherent if no matter what the bookie, no matter what strategy the gambler or the customer chooses, the gambler cannot assure a uniform gain, cannot assure a uniform shore loss for the merchant. It's zero sum, so if I say gain for them, it's loss for them. Any questions about what incoherence means here? We're using uniform dominance. Coherence for two-sided credit. The prices are a coherent set if and only if there's, and now we put finitely additive in as distinguished from the supposition it's countably additive. It doesn't have to be countably additive. That's what a lot of the mathematical details, if they want to create elbow room so that finitely additive probabilities are allowed, not requiring that they be also countably additive. Oh, I should say, there are different ways of formulating these kind of additivity terms. The simplest way of doing it is to say, if I have a union of events that each of which is assigned probability 0, what can I say about the probability of the union? And finite additivity says if it's a finite number of 0 events, their union has to have probability 0. Doesn't matter whether it's destroyed or not. And if countably additive, then a countably union of 0 events has to have probability 0. And Diffinetti says it's okay to require finite, but not to require that a countable union of 0 events and 0. And we can go into why he likes that, but that's what's driving a lot of the details about uniform dominance and finite numbers as part of strategies. So Diffinetti says there's some finitely additive probability P over the state space where each price is the expected value of the random variable under that probability. One probability knits together all the prices. There may be more than one such probability that doesn't, because it depends on the collection of random variables of the price. But there has to be at least one probability such that the prices the bookies announce agree with the expected value. There is the technical notion of an expectation of the random variable. And if not, then the claim is, the theorem reports, there's a strategy for the customer, for the gambler, that creates a sure loss. And the proof is highly constructive. This is all linear algebra. And so you can program, in fact, you can begin to become an arbitrage agent by applying Diffinetti and looking to see when prices have made a sure gain for you. As for example, when you look across different markets, typically within a single market things. But if you have a fast enough computer, you can check the price of oil in one market, the price of oil in another market, you may be able to buy one and sell high. Questions?
Yeah, this is, yeah, I don't know if this is obvious, but, so this is also mean that it's coherent. There's also no, sort of strategy for the black, for the gambler, such that the bookie has a show game. And so like the way it's set up now is that the bookie will have to show us. If it's
That's right.
So it's not very wrong, so.
That's right, because if it could, suppose there were a strategy for the gambler which fell into a short game for the bookie. Well, if you put a minus sign wherever you have a positive sign, switch the signs. Remember, by switching signs, you change who's buying and who's selling. So if there was a strategy where the bookie, the merchant could have a sure gain, then if you switch the signs, then it's the same strategy with the signs reversed. Now you reverse roles, and now the bookie's the short. So your intuition is exactly right, and that will be one of Kurt's exercises. Right? Just if you've got a strategy like that, just change the signs, which is under the control of the second player. And now, if you thought the second player was being foolish, says, aha, you think that's foolish, let me show you, if I can do that, if I can lose money for sure, I can make money for sure. And Hidden's theory says, if you have coherent prices, not good. Yes.
You said that there could be many B or more systems, but if B were to be grossly misspecified or something, then there still be a strategy.
When I say there's more than one P, I'm saying, remember, there's a collection in the background of 5 random variables. Maybe there's only one random variable price.
Okay, so it's more.
It has to do with the number of random variables. Remember, we're not supposing that every random variable will be priced. It's just some collection that the merchant is required to price. And it may be a sufficiently small collection so that there are many different probabilities on the states that agree with the pricing of that thing. But so they all sign the same expectations to be in there. Okay, now we get back to the connection to probabilities, not just provisions. So this was all different work. Different says, let me look at special classes of random variables, indicator functions. Why? Because those are the ones where we're talking about events. Event, yes.
Just if we have this written set in by prices,
Well, one side of prices, we'll come to that. That's the end of the first morning when we see how to get more serious items. Okay, so the booking is looking at pricing now, indicator of variables. I'll call them capital F as opposed to the X's, where F is a subset of the samples of the state space. It partitions the state space into the set of states that belong to the event and the complement that don't. And we'll make the function 1 on the event in question and 0 on its complement. And for pricing these, basically the bookie is offering you bets on a binary partition, F versus not F, because again, buying and selling is under control of the customer. So if the bookie is offering a price of Q on F, Q sub F on F, then by taking minus, you're going to wind up, and remember the random variable is just 1 or 0. So the outcome is going to be 1 minus the price or minus the price. And by switching the sign, you're going to reverse who's buying and who's selling. And so you're going to wind up getting a price on the complementary event. And so since the theorem, to be coherent, it has to be an expectation. The expectation of an indicator function is, I think this one I can write up without making a mistake. The expectation of an indicator function is just the price. You saw Kurt wrote this on the board also yesterday. Let me emphasize it for a moment. So I've got a random variable F. N is 1 if omega belongs to the subset F, and F of omega is 0 if omega belongs to the complementary set or doesn't belong to F, because remember F is a partition of 2. And now the question is, what's the expected value under P? So it's P of, so I'm looking at the sum. What's the expectation of this random variable? So it's the probability that omega belongs to F times 1. Those are the set of states which give the value 1, plus the probability that omega belongs to F complement times 0. So the probability that omega belongs to F is P of F. And so the expected price, the price has to be the expectation of the random variable, which in the case of the indicator function is just the probability of the set. So as a special case, different indicates ordinary betting, where bets are pricing random variables that are indicator functions. So the famous Dutch book, the book argument, is a special case of all of this, where all the random variables are restricted to. And different saw that 1931. How am I doing on time? Where are we now? Kevin?
It's 10, so we agree.
Okay. Try and make it a little bit. Okay, here's an exercise. Let's try and do this one. So this would be in the spirit of what Garrett was doing yesterday. We don't have the desirability framework, we have these pricing frameworks. Suppose the binary partition is E1 complement. Let's call E2 E1 complement. So I've got two indicator functions. The indicator function for E1 and the indicator function for E2, which happens to be E1 complement. The gambler, the bookie announces fair odds, which we know now to be incoherent of 0.4 and 0.7. We'll say, I will buy and sell the indicator function for E1 at a price of 0.4. I will buy and sell an indicator function for E2, which is a complement, at 0.7. Those are not probabilities. They need to add to 1. So these are overpriced. The bookie is prepared to pay more than the bookie should. You need to become a sagey customer, a savvy customer, and figure out what contracts you want to make with the bookie. This is another version of exactly the same sort of exercise that Gert was doing yesterday. Sequential game, the bookie has posted prices of 0.4 and 0.7. What contracts do you want to make? I've put some budgets in there, so you know how much money you have to play with. What contracts do you want to make that show that the bookie is incoherent? Sure loss for the bookie. And the intuition is very clear and guiding you here. Probability says Q1 plus Q2 must equal 1, because the sum of those two indicator variables are constant. The indicator function for F rather, and the indicator function for F complement in every state, one is 1 and 1 is 0, and so their sum is the constant one. So the price of their sum, the price of the constant one had better be 1. Otherwise, something's gone wrong. If I give you a random variable which is a constant 1 and ask you for a price for it, it had better be 1. Otherwise, you're going to go here. So the sum of these two had better be 1. They're not, they're 0.1, they're 1.1. So the bookie is prepared to overpay for the constant 1. That's all that's going on. So make up a strategy. You now see what to do. You want to make the bookie buy, because the bookie's prices are too high. So just think of a strategy where the bookie is forced to overpay, not for separately each one. 0.4 is okay for Q1, and 0.7 is okay for Q2 alone, but not together. They're not separately together. Anyone want to? I mean, I think we see what's going on here. If you say gamma 1 equal to 1 and gamma 2 equal to 1, then the bookie will pay you 1.1 and you'll pay back 1, so you'll make you'll make 0.1 for every sum of two gambles, and then you just spend your money. There are, of course, other strategies as well. The one I gave you is the one that is a constant payment. That is, it loses the same amount in every state. But you could take variations, right? You could say, I'll make a book, but I'll win a little bit more in one state and a little bit less in the other, but I'll always make something. That would also be incoherent. The one I just gave you is a kind of equalizer or a robust strategy. And Thomas, I think tomorrow, you're going to worry about robustness in that sense, where the return is not varying too much. But here you see that even though you're making a book, you might want to say, first thing I think the state's more probable than that, so I want to make a book, but I want to make more in this state than that. And then you're trading off a kind of short game. I'm still going to make a short game, but I'll make less in this state than in that state. But the one that's constant, the one that buys them and makes the bookie buy equal amounts, will always yield a constant return of 0.1. Which is always the overpayment is constant. Everyone following? So you have a variety here. I mean, now there's one little tweak I want to make here. We haven't thought about what the bookie wants to do, what the gambler wants to do, except at this point, the gambler is looking to pursue short gains. The question is, and this is an interesting thing which leads to in a different direction. Suppose the gambler is an expected utility maximum, the kind of agent that it wants us all to do. We have a personal probability on these states and that. The bookie has offered these prices, 0.4 and 0.7. Yeah, they are incoherent. But if you're going to maximize expected utility as a customer, what will you do? Now, this depends on your personal probability, but let me give you an example. Suppose you think the two states are equally probable. Suppose you think F and F complement, excuse me, E and E complement, E1, E2 are equally probable. What kind of strategy maximizes your expected utility? Do you make book is the first question. So here's the kind of tension that's lurking in dividend sale. He's saying to the bookie, the merchant, you better not what? Be incoherent. You better not offer prices that are incoherent, because customer come along and make you a short loser. You don't want to be exposed. But let's do a little bit of strategizing here. Suppose the bookie says, but I'm dealing with a coherent agent. I don't know anyone in the room who's a dividend agent. Let's suppose Bella, say Bella. Suppose Bella is a Bella spent time on the before she got Allison. And let's suppose you're a dividend customer. You're going to maximize expected utility. Do you make book? Let's just take a moment to think about this. This is not obvious. You've got, but you can see that you're reasoning your way through what strategies are. You get a certain return on investment for either buying or selling E1. You get a certain return on investment for buying or selling E2. You've got a certain finite amount of money to do. How do you want to divide these investments? You can certainly make book. You can win 0.1 on each pair of gambles you make, but does that maximize your expected utility? Well, it does. Well, there's a certain rate of return for buying E1, for selling E1, for buying E2, for selling E2, per unit investment. The sum of the expected utility of the sum is the sum of the expectations. So if one of these investments has the best return in expected utility, you'll put all your money there. And if you think about it, the best return here is the one in which Q2, the bookie, is paying you 0.7 for something that you think is only worth 0.5. So that's where all your money is going to go. You're not going to make book. So there's a bit of tension in here, which I don't think this area has ever faced up to. He's threatening the bookie with incoherence for not being an expected utility maximizer, for not having fair prices. But the bookie, if the bookie knows there's one customer, this customer is coherent, says, so what? I'll offer incoherent odds, it's not gonna make book against me, because to make book against me, you have to violate maximizing expected utility. There's an issue here, and this actually surfaces in some current literature in the IP. This theory has a sanction for being incoherent, that is, you're supposed to avoid sure losses, but the theory does not require you to pursue sure gains. That's the point of this one. And this is inherited by IP. And some people, at least in the philosophical community I see, have started to say there's something wrong with IP because it allows you to pass up opportunities to make sure gains. I don't know if any of you have seen that part of the philosophical literature. Some of it emanates from MIT, the wrong three letters was. Anyway, I'm just pointing out that there's an asymmetry here in the way these normative theories being formulated. You're being told to avoid the risk of the possibility of a sure loss, but on the other side of the game, you're not required to pursue sure gains. And in fact, maximizing expected utility in this kind of setup typically never require you to pursue a sure gain. It may be possible. It may be just as good, but it will never be uniquely the best thing. And sometimes it's not possible. That is, maximizing expected utility will not allow you to make a short gain.
Just go through one more time, exactly.
Sure, this is exactly the kind of exercise that we do with desire. So basically, a strategy is going to be a sum of four expectations for you from the standpoint of the customer. There's the amount that I've invested in selling E1, there's the amount I've invested in buying E1, there's the amount I've invested in selling E2, and the amount I've invested in buying E2 at the prices that the booking is fixed. The value of that strategy, which is the value of the sum, is the expectation of the sum is the sum of the expectations. And so to maximize my expected utility, I want to maximize the sum. And if one of the terms has the best return per investment, all my money goes there. What's following? I'm giving you have a finite amount of money to invest. Each unit invested has an expected utility associated with it, depending on your strategy. The expectation of your sum is the sum of the expectation. So I can say, well, you've invested so much in buying E1, so much in selling E1, so much in buying E1. And see what your gains are for a unit investment. And the expected utility will be some of those. You want to maximize your expected. One of these investment opportunities, exactly one of them, maximizes your expected return. It's the one where you're making the book pay 0.7 for something only worth 100. So you're getting 0.7. So every unit invested, you're getting a difference of 0.2 bid. That's where you want to go the money. No sure gain guarantee, but you're maximizing expected utility. So there's this inherent asymmetry in the theory. Normatively, you're sanctioned for being incoherent because you might have sure loss made against you, which certainly could occur with multiple customers, because some customers might maximize this way. So that way, and you might fall into, but not one customer, if that one customer is an expected utility maximizer. There's a bit of asymmetry. As far as I know, Disney never faced up to that problem. I think it's interesting. You'll see how it surfaces later, what we're doing. This relates to the problem of incentivizing how to announce your prices. If I'm not worried about you making book against me, even though you could, then why is the sanction for? Okay, how much time left, Kevin?
20, yeah. 20.
Good. Let's do the fundamental theorem and do. So there's one thing I want to discuss with you now, which is Diffinetti's approach to pricing and the realization that you may have priced some random variables, and now you can actually think about some random variables. You've driven yourself to think about some random variables, price them, and now the situation is such that you're asked to consider some additional random. So mathematically, we have to do extending. You've got prices, and now you're asking, you've already committed yourself to those prices. Here's some more things to think about. What prices should you do? You're not learning anything. You're just being asked to extend your pricing. It's an extension of functions problem.
And Diffinetti solves this problem. This is what he calls the fundamental theorem. And to understand what's going on here, you have to say, well, what am I already committed to if I've got fair odds? That is, the bookie has posted some fair odds. We can think of these events in a moment. So there's the set pi, which is some collection of events. The bookie has posted fair odds on those events. What other events is the bookie already committed to having fair odds on? And I force the bookie to give me two-sided fair odds on. The point is, outside of those, there may be some freedom for what the price, but the ones that I'm already committed to, I have no freedom. So if A and B are disjoint events, let C be their union. So let's think of the special case where we've got pairs of events, A and B, that are disjoint. And they may not be complementary, but they can't both occur. And C their union. Suppose the bookie has posted fair odds on A and B. Then by the game we've played, you can make the bookie buy both, which then basically is giving you fair odds on C. The C is just the sum of their two indicator functions. C being the indicator function of their union, you can make the bookie buy A, buy B, and then the bookie has bought C. Sell you A and B, in which case the bookie sell A or sell B, the bookie has sold you. Sell A and sell B, which means the bookie has sold you C. So you see, in this case, C may not belong to the original collection, but the bookie has no elbow room. C, if it suddenly asks to bet on C, the bookie's already committed to pricing. If the bookie has posted odds on the union C and one of the components A, then you can force the bookie to give you fair prices on the residual C minus A. So again, A and B are disjoint, their union is C. If you've got, the first one says if we've got A and B, we've got prices on C. The second result says if we've got C and one of A or B, we can get the other one by buying one and selling the other. You buy on C and sell on B, gets you back prices. Those are the two maneuvers that you can force the bookie. Outside of that, you can't force the bookie to give you fair prices. The bookie has opportunities what to do. So the Diffinetti's fundamental theorem formulated for events says, let's E. So the set E of events has been defined, a set of indicator functions, and coherent prices have been given for E. So we've got coherent prices for every event in the set E. So some one probability at least gives us all the prices that we've given in the script set E. Let E star be the events which, by the rules of the game, compel well-defined prices. And you see, I've given you two strategies, but basically they exhaust all the events that you can force the bookie to give you fair odds on. So you look for elements of the script set E that are disjoint in their unions. Let F be another event that's not in E. What are the bookie's options for two-sided prices for this new event F? Either F is in the span. So for those of you who've done some real analysis, this is a precursor, or actually it's not a precursor historically, it's a variant of extending additive set functions by looking at what's technical intermeasurable. So the idea is F is an indicator function, it's a 0-1 function. I've got a bunch of events E that I've more indicator functions that I've already priced, and the ones I'm committed to. I can try and approximate F from below, that is, events that are subsets, their indicator function is never bigger. There, wherever F has one, this has, wherever this has one, F has one. But maybe there are some places that I can't get to. So I can approximate F from below. And I can approximate F from above by events that are whenever the indicator function has one of these events out. But they're bigger in history. So I'm sandwiching F between events from below, subsets and supersets. And what I can do is look at the supremum of the approximations from below and the infimum from the approximations above. And differentiating proves that's always close to the pricing game. And he proves that the price of F coherently can be chosen to be any value in that closed interval. Now, if F is one of the ones I'm committed to, the upper and the lower collapse, because I get to it from both above and below exactly. And then I have only one price. But otherwise, I've got a range of prices. This looks like an early IP theory. It looks like I have on one side the prices coming from below, another coming from above, and these don't have to agree. Diffinenti's not thinking of it as IP. He's simply saying, well, this is showing you where the bookie can go to fix a price. Go to any probability that it goes in between. Let's see what this leads to. And just to let you know what's going on here, I want to show you the difference between the logic and the linear span. Linear span is a linear combination of price. At least question, yes.
Can you explain what Q star is?
What is
Q star?
yeah. E star is the set of events for which I've got precise probabilities and which are subsets of the event F. That means F indicator function is always bigger than or equal to every one of these E indicator functions. It's a subset, remember, these are indicator functions, they're 1 or 0. So if it's a subset, it will, if an event E is a subset of F, its indicator function, when it takes the value 1, F will take the value 1, but F may take the value 1 in cases where it takes the value 0. So I'm approximating F as a function from below. I'm never bigger than F, but I'm some. I might sometimes be smaller than F. F may take the value 1, and E is taking the value 0, so it's approximating from below in terms of values. So it's a subset approximating from inside F. And then the upper star, F, sorry, so F lower bar are the approximations from below, and F upper bar are the approximations from above. E star are the set of events that the bookie is committed to having precise values. Remember, originally the bookie just gave precise values for the script set E. But we said that from what we looked at, the bookie may actually be committed to two-sided prices on something larger and called E star. Those are the prices we got by adding together disjoint events. So E star are the ones that the bookie is obliged to give two-sided prices on, which may be bigger than the city script E. Then F lower bar is the approximation of F from below using the events E in each script star. And F upper bar is the approximation from above. Does that give you a better picture?
Yeah, but I'm struggling to understand what you mean by obliged to, compelled to.
The rules of the game are such that if the bookie, suppose A and B are disjoint events. If the bookie is given fair prices on A and fair prices on B, then by the rules of the game, the customer can force the bookie to give fair prices on A union B, which is the event C. Now, C may not have something that the bookie may not be something that the bookie really can direct the price, but you can force the bookie pricing.
It's not logical.
Well, it's linear. It's the linear span. It's the linear combinations of what the ordered price. That's what Kurt was talking about. Remember, we're looking at desirability, which is what Kurt was discussing yesterday. Is another way of looking at what's going on, but we're not doing desirability. We're just doing price. I think Kurt was. So this is reminding us that the pricing has a commitment that's larger than just to the things initially priced. Combinations are already priced. So we have lower and upper bounds, which are the prices from below and the prices from above that approximate F. If these are the same, then F is part of E star. But if they're not, there's a range and it's a closed interval of options always, and definitely proof you can go anywhere in that closed interval. The reason it's closed is because these are including the indifference point. Fair odds are including the break-even point. And that's why we're getting closed intervals. It's not just what's desirable, it's the limit of those, which gives us what's fair. So they're always in. Okay, now the fundamental theorem says this is where you can go as a bookie. And I want to just, how much time do we have? 10 minutes, Kevin, or less? 11, okay. So here's something I'd like you to start to work on. I'll discuss it because we don't have enough time to go through the details. It's not an obvious exercise. It takes some effort to create this type of exercise. But let me show it to you. Suppose we have the outcome space associated with rolling a die, side up counts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, die can't land on edge, die doesn't roll out of sight, roll out of sight, just 6 outcomes. And suppose the set of events that as the bookie you're asked to price are these 4 events and only these 4. The event 1, the event 3, 6, the event 1, 2, 3, and the event 1, 2, 4. That is 1, 2, 4 means the die lands 1 or 2 or 4. So 3, 6 means the die lands 3 or 6. And suppose the bookie posts fair odds that agree with the judgment the die is fair, which is 1/6 on each side. So the first event 1, that is the one gets 1/6, that 3, 6 gets the third, and each of the 2, 3 elements out. Now we know already that you're already committed to the complement. We know that. So in pricing 1 at 1/6, the bookie is already pricing, or you are already pricing the complementary event, which is 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Those one of those is at 5, 6. I already have that. That's part of the. And the fundamental theorem identifies which events are precise and which events give you have intervals. Now, I want to tell you what this why it's worth going through this exercise. So there are 64 events in the pooling algebra. And of the events is priced come in pairs. So if you price an event, you price its complement. So there are 32 pairs that we're worried about. And of the 32 pairs, the claim is that the agent is committed from these 4 plus the sure event. I mean, there's a sure event the empty set, and then sure event goes to 0, 1, that's one of the pairs. So there are 11 pairs that are non-trivial that come out of these 4. So the claim is there are only 12 pairs of complementary events that the agent has a forced exact fair price, and everything else is in. Why am I emphasizing this? Well, we can go through it. We've spent 5 minutes or so starting to figure out what these are. I'll tell you what to look for. As I say, this is not an obvious. So 24 of the 64 events, 12 pairs of the 32 pairs. There's the pair which consists of the sure event of the empty set. That's always priced because that's pricing the constant 1 and pricing the constant 0. The event, the sure event is the constant duplicator function 1, 1, 1. So that's a constant 1 has to have price 1. And its complement, the empty event is the indicator function, which always gets the value 0. So it's constant 0. So that's always priced at 1 and 0. Then there are 2 singleton events, one of which was explicitly given. That was the one, the singleton 1, and then the outcome 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. There's another one like that. There are 5 doubleton events, and there are 4 complements. And there are 4 3-atom events, and there are 3 complements, 2 of which are explicitly given. For example, you'll be able to see that the 6 is not one of the 2 for singletons, and so there's a range in which the only thing that approximates 6 or below is the empty set, and so it's 0 on the bottom, and the only thing that approximates 6 above is, say, 3, 6, which already had the value 1/3. You can't get inside of it. So this is or was it? Yeah. So this is the part I wanted to show you. The smallest algebra that holds together the set E. You've priced those 4 events explicitly plus the empty set. What's the smallest Boolean algebra that holds those together? Take intersections and unions. It's the full space of 2 to the 6th. By taking intersections and unions, you can quickly recover every atom. And since once you have the atoms, once you have each of the singletons, you have the whole space. So the Boolean algebra, which would be the logic of the space, says once you've priced these, the Boolean algebra gives you everything. But that is not what the game gives you. The game gives you the linear span. And so if the game is what rationality is about, then you are not obliged to be logically omniscient in order to be coherent. Let me say that again. You do not have to work out all the logic of your minimum logical space in order to be coherent. In this case, the example shows that you only need to produce 24 of these 64 events as having precise ones. The other ones they haven't thought about yet. They've got a range. The Boolean algebra forces me to assign values to everything in this space. So the theory of rational closure in this game is not the theory of logical closure. That's the point of this exercise. From a philosophical point of view, it's saying, Diffinetti is saying, if the only thing I have to be coherent about is what the game forces me to be coherent about, the game only forces me to be coherent about much less than what logic would ask me to solve. But the logic of these 4 events takes me to the full Boolean algebra, the biggest Boolean algebra. So you take a moment or two. We have 3 or 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a couple of minutes. Try and find. So there's one singleton in there, the 1. I'm saying that you can force the agent to give you a sure price on one other singleton. See if you can figure that one out. And once you've done that, you can start to move for some of the others, the doubletons.
Tell you to the previous slide. So we can see.
Sure. By all the slides are up, but right, yes, the question is for you to work at. Yeah, so 1, 3, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4. So you have, for example, from 1, 2, 3, you also have priced a half, 4, 5, 6, the complement. And from 1 to 4, you have a half on 3, 5, 6. So I'm saying there's another singleton you can quickly get to. Someone sing it out if you spot it. Yeah. Oh, you don't have to copy that. Names 5, yes, exactly. So give us the rule, give us the betting strategies that show that the agent is, I mean, what are you doing to get 5, saying that the agent who's priced these 4 is committed to a precise price on 5? How'd you get 5?
Take 3, 6, union 1, 2, 4, take the complements, and that gives you 5
Sure,
sets.
that's one way. There's more than one way into this. That's perfectly fine to make another way. For example, the complement of 1, 2, 3 is 4, 5, 6. I've got 3, 6. 4, 5, 6, take away 3, 6, leaves me 5. There's more than one. The whole point is there's multiple ways. So that, and the claim is you can't get any other singles. And it's quick. I think you can see the Boolean algebra would allow you to do more. For example, you could get well, I think you go through the logic and prove that the operation of intersection union. Notice you don't have arbitrary intersection with our betting strategy. It's only disjoint things. I can have A, B, and B, C, but I can't get B out of that. I can have A, B well priced and B, C well priced, but that doesn't mean that B well priced. Even though they're well. Yes.
So I think on one of the previous slides had these orders for the lower and the other bound. Yeah. So E star is the set of all the.
E star is the
assessments.
yeah. E star is the one that you're committed to. So E star be the events which the rules of the game compel precise values. So I'm looking at the linear span restricted to the indicator functions. This is a special case where I don't have to worry about any. And you might be wondering, it turns out that we're dealing with indicator functions. You don't need to worry about the approximation.
Just didn't realize that that's what you saw.
Yeah, no, E star.
You have systems for.
Yeah, the ones that you're committed to, as opposed to the ones you discussed. And I'm going through now, trying to get people to see that you're not committed to, you are committed to one other singleton, but then it's exercise to show you're not committed to any others. Okay, so the reason for this exercise, it's both to introduce you to where diffinity looks like he was heading towards imprecise probabilities. Next, right after the break, we'll see why he doesn't work. Why he objected to that interpretation of the work. And there are other features of this which I will mention, which is interesting. I find it interesting. Raquel and I have been exploring some aspects of this. So let me mention another thing here. So diffinity says, look, if you've made these four assessments, 1, 3, 6, at these values, and then there's the set you're committed to. You're committed only to the 24, so that 24 pairs, so that in particular you'd see that for the singleton 6, you have a range of 0 to 1/3. And diffinity says, okay, so with regard to 0, 6, this is 0.6, I've got a range of anything from 0, including 0, up to 1/3, including 1/3 that I might go. He said, go there. Think about it, we're going to extend somewhere in there. So this looks like, from an IP point of view, that the process of thinking is going to shift me from an interval of lower probability 0, upper probability 1/3 to some value in. That's what thinking, he says, go think about it harder, and you'll come up with a precise value. Question. Can we, the answer to this question is no. The question, can we model diffinity thinking as some sort of introspection which looks like learning? Where I have this interval, I do an experiment called thinking, I get an outcome, and my probability updates to some value between 0 and 1/3, say a 1/6. Can I represent it? The answer is no. Thinking is not learning. And we'll see why. It has to do with, when we get to the value of information results, we'll see why. Diffinity's approach says, well, when you go through this process of extending, it turns out you're not thinking in the sense in which you're learning something new and updating. So it's a different process. It's some different kind of process. Kelly, is anything you want to say? So already you see that this business of interpreting these ranges are not like, oh, it's a set of probabilities. I update by introspecting and thinking, I think about something, think about a value, I learn it, I didn't realize it before, and now I update to 6. Can't do that. Cannot be done that way. There's no such thinking possible bodies as learning. And the reason is because you're always going inside, you're always learning, and you're shrinking. And that's not possible in IP theory, it stays up there. Short answer is, if you start with an interval and you conduct an experiment, you cannot always be assured of going strictly inside. That's what this is asking. See why. So there's this fundamental theorem is asking us to do something which is rather different than the kind of phase updating or learning models that we'll do with IP theory. And so I'm just trying to say, it looks like IP theory, it smells like IP theory, but it's not IP theory. Okay, let's break it.